question of reality is one that every individual has dwelled on. From as simple as experiencing deja vu to meditating on the entire space-time quandary, we've all questioned ourselves on the interpretation of our experiences. This has been a part of philosophy since the days of Plato, demonstrated best by his allegory of the cave. The exploration of reality has been a constant in the history of thought, from Descartes' cogito ergo sum to Timothy Leary's reality tunnel. In popular films such as Inception or The Matrix, and books such as Philip Pullman's Dark Materials trilogy, topics such as simulation theory, dreams, and the multiverse hypothesis are dragged into the collective consciousness. In this series of video essays, we shall attempt to explore the different outlets of our relationship to reality. How we interpret reality is an essential part of our everyday life, as it represents our ontological understanding of our surroundings, defined by Merriam-Webster as the quality or state of being real, i.e., real event, entity, or state of affairs, the totality of real things and events, something that is neither derivative nor dependent, but exists necessarily. This can also be translated into what is not imaginary. The vector with which we confront and process reality is our mind or consciousness. Our understanding of reality is dependent on this, and leads to the argument of each of us perceiving an individual reality. This huge topic will be addressed in a later essay, but in this series we'll focus on mind-altering substances and how they influence our experience of reality and the pursuit of everyday activities such as music, art, festivities, or academic pursuits. We interviewed a STEM PhD in one of Britain's leading universities and transcribed our discussion into the resulting essay. This is channeling the flow of discussion between a mathematics student and a philosophy student. Focusing, although not limiting to mathematics, we explore on mathematics, their relationship with reality, and how psychedelics interact with the mathematician.
I'm pursuing a PhD in a mathematical subject, and so I think I'm just barely qualified to talk about maths. About reality is subjective or objective. I'm not qualified at all, but I don't see how anybody could possibly be. And about psychedelics, I've used a few, purely for psychonautic purposes.
Are reality and the universe following a mathematical formula, or have we superimposed maths on the universe as a way of understanding it?
We believe that mathematics actually exists in a non-contingent way. It is something that is discovered rather than invented, whilst being independent from the concrete universe. The maths used by physicists follow 9 basic rules, known as axioms, all of which operate separately from the physical universe. The maths come first before being applied to physics and this understanding of the universe. Numbers and all their forms are perfect and unchanging, separate from the physical universe. Secondly, certain theories of physics make predictions. The test of these predictions can be remarkably precise, some coming out to more than 11 decimal places of accuracy, and these are in astronomically tiny units. These two things suggest the universe is running only under purely mathematical direction. We would recommend reading The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences by Eugene Wigner for a more in-depth understanding of this particular topic.
If reality is subjective, is maths?
This ultimately depends on the definition of reality we use. If reality is everything that exists, then yes, because for a mathematician, maths exists just as much as any other exact but non-located thing, such as conscious experience. This is separate from the neuronal process, despite being dependent on it. Although conscious experience is dependent on the neural sequence, it is distinct from it. This is not necessarily a dualistic approach. However, this is not a definition of reality we shall use, and will now attempt to give a definition of reality that, although unsatisfactory to many, shall fulfill the criteria needed to make further claims. It shall rely at least partly on a priori intuition. We will call the world a collection of physical facts. What is meant by physical facts I will leave to set intuition. These facts are objective, common to all conscious observers, but the world may or may not exist. The only thing we can feel sure about is, purposefully butchering Descartes, that there is a conscious experience of something going on, and the world is reflected within the conscious experience. For example, in the world, photons hit my retina and are converted into wet noisy signals in my brain, which is then processed, the process of processing by magic creating my conscious experience. Despite using the first person, we are at no point positing a self. Reality being subjective or objective is instead a question regarding the existence of the world and if it informs our conscious experience. The world not existing would mean reality is being subjective. In light of this definition, maths would still be objective, as it does not depend on physical facts that constitute the world. This dichotomy would be in line with the idea of Plato's forms. He believed in the world of abstract ideals. These were called the forms, and much like my conception of maths, were discovered rather than created. They were unchangeable, eternal, and perfect, and would both predate and survive the destruction of the physical universe.
Do psychedelics alter reality or merely the perception of it? Is an insane person living in a separate reality or merely interpreting ours individually?
If reality was to be subjective, psychedelic use or insanity would alter reality itself, because reality becomes identified with our subjective experience of it, which has changed in both cases. But we have made the assumption that reality is objective. Drugs such as schizotoxins or psychomimetics divide psychologists regarding their definition of psychedelics. As a matter of fact, one of the earliest uses of LSD was for practitioners to experience insanity, to have a better understanding of the world seen through their patient's eyes. Whether or not these accurately simulate insanity is not the focus of this talk, however. But drug use and insanity do have something important in common, that the brain is physically altered from baseline in a way that affects how it generates our conscious experience. In both cases, merely the perception of reality is changed.
Would our maths work in different universes?
This primarily depends on the function of the word work. We can imagine universes with no comprehensible theory of everything, as a Chaitin's constant, a real number that, informally speaking, represents a probability that a randomly constructed program will halt, was a universe. In a universe following this pattern, any unfortunate physicists and engineers cannot use maths to make any sort of predictions about anything. In other words, they could not apply mathematics. However, we have already made the assumption above that maths is somehow non-contingent. With this in mind, there can be no universe in which 1 + 1 = 3.
What are your thoughts on the multiverse theory?
The multiverse theory is an enveloping term that can be applied to multiple hypotheses, and we should address a few of them. The fact that this is a computer scientist and not a physicist talking should be kept in mind. A central idea in quantum mechanics is that the result of an experiment is probabilistic. Each probable outcome comes with an associated amplitude, a complex number, the squared magnitude of which giving the probability of that outcome. The set of outcomes and amplitudes is called a wave function. The many worlds interpretation essentially posits that the wave function is actually real, and that nothing special happens when the experiment is performed, that the wave function does not collapse onto the observed outcome, but rather the universe somehow branches out according to every possible outcome. This interpretation has a certain appeal. It's somehow the simplest according to Occam's razor, and is actually a deterministic theory. This can be understood as an interpretation of quantum mechanics. Now, let's think a little bit about the simulation theory, that the universe and everything in it, including me and you, is just a simulation performed in some computer in some external world. Here's an argument commonly given in its favour. It is either possible or not possible that a civilization becomes advanced enough to simulate an entirely new universe. If it is possible, and if ran for long enough, a simulated civilization will also become advanced enough to do the same, and again, and again. There is an increasing unbounded number of simulated universes, and the probability that we live in an original universe is vanishingly small. This is believable to many, and these people are forced to believe in many universes.
When drug-taking artists produce unworldly works, do you believe this is their imagination or their altered reality due to their psychedelic consumption?
We can assume that Hunter S. Thompson would never have been able to write what he wrote if he was straight edge. Every piece of writing is a function of the experience of the author. Every drug experience is ineffable, and cannot be conferred to others properly through any sort of media. Many drug experiences are utterly unlike anything possibly experienced while sober. It would be very, very hard for a straight-edge Thompson to write as if he'd experienced these things, so unlike things he actually experienced. With this in mind, we can apply it to other forms of art, and assume that the psychedelic experiences is one that would determine the thought process of the artist and thus influence their creations. In other words, mind-altering substances, when consumed by one who will create, are inextricably linked to their creative process and can never not be part of the artistic process. When one hears Santana's account of the acid on his famous set at Woodstock, one clearly understands even the unintentional influence of psychedelics on his work.
Tom Waits once said, "Reality is for people who are scared of drugs." Discuss.
Despite the charm of this quote, certain points can be made to counteract the claims it makes. This statement really deals with the fundamental question of, if drugs exist, then why doesn't everyone take them? Although the answer for each individual is personal and unique, there are some common themes. Some consider drug use as degenerate behaviour which is below them. Some predict they won't like it. Some have overcome addiction in the past and have decided that straight edge is the way to go. And a few are scared, understandably. This would mean that Tom Waits is only correct about this last subsection. His quote suggests that he is making the assumption used by the majority of the anti-drug lobby, the idea that all drugs are the same and they are all conduits away from communal reality. Far from an escape from reality, stimulants and low-dose psychedelics can bring about a state of hyper-reality that makes day-to-day sobriety feel like you've taken a shitty drug. Tom Waits is talking from the privileged position of a singer and poet, and as such can spend extended periods under the influence of drugs. Through this he commands a rare perspective that's unattainable to most drug users.
Maths seems to perfectly fit the definition of Plato's forms. These perfect eternals are disassociated from our physical understanding of the universe. Maths and numbers very much belong to the metaphysical realm, and this makes them an objective quality in a world that can be interpreted individually. The universe is programming maths, and we are all hackers attempting to break this code. Mind-altering substances allow this reading to be done from another perspective. When Charles Manson heard the Beatles whilst on acid, the message he heard was so altered as to lose its original meaning. The angle from which he approached reality gave him a capacity to understand his world in a different way and thus create a new one. One can assume when Erdos looked upon his maths papers, fueled by amphetamines, he saw mathematical theorems from an angle nobody ever had, his out-of-body experiences giving him a personal understanding of the mathematical forms. Drugs, alcohol, and other hallucinogens give different answers to the same questions. Although they may not be correct, they are still to be explored as subjective interpretations of the objective reality that is mathematics.